Oh, sorry. Didn't see you there. I was just catching up on some of my reading. Pretty good book. But I understand you're interested in my Mustang. So I won't waste any more of your time. Let's get into the car. So this is my 1983 Mustang L. This is a Fox body Mustang. So they built these from 1979 all the way up to 1993. There were three different facelifts. There was the 79 to 82. There was 83 to 86, which is what this one is. And then there was 87 to 93. So this is the second generation, I guess you could say, of Fox body. It's characterized by these four headlights up here. So some people call it the four-eyed fox. I call her Brenda Lee. This is my personal car. I daily drive this every single day. Believe it or not, I am the second owner. This car only has 51,000 kilometers. Now, for all the Americans out there, that's about 32,000 miles. Now, this car does not have the sixth digit on the odometer. So how can I be certain that the mileage is accurate? Well, I have verified it through numerous different sources. I've pulled the Carfax on it. It checks out. I've looked at things like pedal wear and overall condition of the interior and exterior. I've also taken it to a mechanic. He's gone underneath it with a fine-tooth comb. The undercarriage is solid, not a speck of rust. All of the bushings, you know, they're pretty old now, but still pretty solid shape. I've also been inside of the engine with the borescope, and the clearances are tight. This car has hardly been broken in. And on top of that, I've spoken with the original owner and their family members who remember the day that he brought this brand new from the showroom. So I know the history of this car. This thing has been babied. He hardly drove it at all. For most of its life, it was parked underneath a carport. Occasionally he would drive it to his job at Costco. And that's really what attracted me to this car. A lot of Fox body Mustangs are turned into drag racers or race cars, or people chop the suspension and lower it down and they just abuse them. But this car is not the case. Even though it is just a V6 automatic, because of that, it's in remarkable shape. I've been over this car. There's not a speck of rust. Sure, there's a few chips in the original paint, but what can you expect from a 41-year-old car? This car is highly original. The only things that I've really touched on this car are things like adding a new battery, spark plugs, plug wires, basic maintenance items, as well as adding new tires. When I bought this car, it still had the original 14-inch rims with the original tires, 40 years old. They were hard and cracked and dry, and they had to go for safety reasons. So instead, I've upgraded it with some 16-inch period correct mesh rims and new tires as well. The tires are now about 1 year old, but still plenty of life, lots of tread left. Let's talk about the interior for a moment. Inside, this car is immaculate. This right here is probably the reason why I bought this. For some reason, I am attracted to tweed plaid seats. And these ones are in fantastic shape. There's no rips, there's no tears, there's no weird smells. The door panels are in fantastic shape. The dash isn't cracked. The steering wheel is not sticky or gross. Carpeting is still fresh, no weird stains or rips or tears or anything like that. This interior may be pretty bare bones. It is the base model L trim, but it's in immaculate shape. There really aren't that many features in here to talk about, but two of my favorites are the horn button. It's not a conventional button like you'd press on the steering wheel. It's on the turn signal stalk. And to press the horn, you press in on the turn signal, and that's what honks the horn. The other feature I love is the Ultra 80s semi-digital warning system. It tells you if your taillight or your brake lamp or you're out of fuel, maybe you're low on washer fluid. If so, one of those little lights will light up. To get the keys out of the ignition, there's a strange little trick. In order to actually get them out, there's a small button underneath the steering wheel. You have to push that up as you turn the keys. Otherwise, they'll be locked in. I remember the first time I drove this car and I took it home. I couldn't get the keys out of the ignition, and it took me forever to figure that out. This car may not have air conditioning, but it does have these handy little vents. You just pull on the little handle, the vent will open, and it cools your legs quite nicely, actually. There is a small digital clock on the center console. It still keeps time, and it is accurate. No FM radio in this. Because it's the L, it has AM radio. All of the gauges work. The heater blows warm. The rear defrost works quite well, and this car warms up in no time flat. The crank windows operate smoothly. You have these handy mirror adjustment knobs here. Visibility is excellent in this car, thanks to the thin A-pillars and the very large back glass on the hatch. Speaking of the hatch, this Mustang is practical. There's quite a bit of space back there. The rear seats do fold down, and this little Mustang still has the original cover. So if you want to hide and protect your goods, you just pull this little cover here, and it's safe and sound. One thing I should mention is there's a small piece of foam wrapped around the weather stripping here. Maybe it used to leak at some point. It was added by the previous owner, so I'm not really too sure. It's easily removable if you don't want it, but this car does not leak at all. As we get into the engine bay, you can see it's nothing too special. It's very original. It's just the 3.8 V6. This was the standard motor that you would get. It does not have the V8, but if you did wish to add one, it'd be very easy to do so. There's a wealth of information online, tons of kits, thousands of people convert these, so you'd have no trouble. I didn't bother to do it because I didn't want to touch this car. It's so original and it works just fine. Factory, this is only rated at about 112 horsepower, but it's a pretty light vehicle, and the 3-speed automatic does a pretty good job. Kickdown works well, and it runs like a champ. I really haven't touched anything on this motor other than spark plugs, plug wires, cap rotor, and a new battery, of course. I also had this car checked out by a mechanic. He went in with a boroscope. It's clean, very tidy, although it did have quite a bit of carbon buildup. And so I had this motor carbon treated. It's been completely flushed out, and now it is very, very clean on the inside. It also has been tuned back to the factory specifications. This car does have a few blemishes. It is 41 years old after all. Nothing too major, just a couple of chips in the paint. Also, this black trim here, I repainted because it was fading, and the plastics from the 80s, they do this terrible thing where they turn yellow. So I just did a very quick job around just to spruce it up a little bit and make it look factory fresh. With that being said, there's no rust on this car. And that's actually quite rare for a Pacific Northwest vehicle. But since this car was hardly ever driven and spent most of its time in a carport, thankfully, inside, out, and underneath, it's very clean. So that pretty much sums it up. If you have any more questions, of course, feel free to reach out and ask, and I'll answer them to the best of my abilities. But I think I've done enough talking, so I'm gonna hop in this and go for one last drive. I hope that this goes to a fantastic buyer, and I know it's gonna go to a very special person. You know who you are.